Hi, everybody. Welcome to Word on the Street. We're so happy you're here. We've got two guests coming. My name is Jenny. I'm the host for this 45 minutes. But before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the land that we're on. And so the Lethbridge Public Library acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So thank you. And with that, we will move on to our first guest is Eric Walters. We're so happy you're here. Yay.
I'm happy to sort of be there.
Yes, we can hear and see him, so that is great. And so just a brief introduction to Eric. Eric Walters is one of Canada's best known and most prolific writers of fiction for children and young adults. His books have won over 120 awards, including 13 separate Children's Choice Awards, and have been translated into 13 languages. He lives in Guelph, Ontario, and is the co-founder of Creation of Hope, a charity that provides care for orphans in, how do I say that, Eric?
Whatever you say, I'll just nod my head and say it's
okay.
correct.
Mbooni district of Kenya.
That was pretty good.
Oh, good.
With the M, you're sort of you think it, but you don't actually say it. So it's Mbooni.
Okay. Bonnie. Thank you.
Spoken like a Kenyan.
Yeah. That's wow. I get to be there. So thanks, Eric. I'm glad you're here. And then we also have Michelle. I've known Michelle for a lot of years, and I'm pleased to have her here. So I'll just give it over to Eric and Michelle. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Hey, Michelle.
Hi. I'd like to just start with a little bit, a few other details about Eric, if you don't mind. I want to say honestly how delighted that I am to have this opportunity to interview, have a conversation with you today for Word on the Street Lethbridge. We do sincerely wish that we could have done this in person, but we will accept where we're at and embrace this technology. I'm grateful for it. And I want to say that you are well known, Eric, throughout Canada, throughout the world, and you are well loved in Lethbridge and Alberta. You are well known to the Rocky Mountain Book Award readers, leaders, and committee members like myself. Rocky Mountain Book Award is a provincial Children's Choice Award program for students in grades 4 to 7 throughout Alberta. And your books have been on our list 7 times. With you winning the Rocky Mountain Book Award Gold Medal for Safe as Houses back in 2009. And we're going into 20 years now, Eric, and I just had to remind our readers how wonderful this story is. I hope people will go back and read it, and they'll see why the students of Alberta voted it #1.
Well, it's nice to have #1, although apparently I've got one more still pending, and I've lost 5 times, so that's a terrible batting average.
Well, you know,
I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs of the Children's Choice Award out there, I think. Although they never win, that's the difference.
I think that you should celebrate that win, and I also think that you should celebrate your new book, Broken Strings. It is on the 2021 Rocky Mountain Book Award list. But more importantly, you mentioned this to me and I looked it up, Eric. You are on the TD Canadian Children's Literature Award for this book, and you could win big with this one. So with our readers and maybe with Canada.
Actually, you're half right. It is up for that award, but not more importantly. I love Children's Choice Awards. They're my favorites. I've won a whole bunch across the country. I love Children's Choice Awards. For a thing like the TD book, it's 3 adults who decide who wins. For the Children's Choice Awards, sometimes it's 150,000 kids. That's right. So much better. I wish I could be in Lethbridge, and I'm not saying this because I'm talking to Lethbridge right now, but the Lethbridge word on the street is the word on the street in all of Canada. I've been in different word on the streets, and I kind of like Saskatchewan too. I'm going to be honest about that. But compared to the bigger cities, this is just outstanding. Your word on the street is an entire community project, and it just feels like the whole city is involved with it. It's just such a delight to be there, and I wish I could be there in person, to be having a cup of tea and just sitting and meeting with people.
Oh. Well, Eric, if you were at Word in the Street and today on this interview, the reason that we reached out to you was not about your more than 100 books, although you saw how I managed to get that in today. We're really here to talk about a project that you started a couple of years ago that has sparked something truly exciting in Canada. It's the I Read Canadian, and it is a project near and dear to my heart because it celebrates Canadian authors and illustrators, and it encourages everyone to read more Canadian. And so we would love for you to tell us about your I Read Canadian project, how it started, and why it's important.
It actually started in Lethbridge. Hardly anyone knows that. I was on a tour, Lethbridge to Calgary to Edmonton to Red Deer to North Battleford to Saskatoon to Regina to small places in Saskatchewan, small places in Manitoba, and in Winnipeg. There's a lot of driving involved in that trip. I was on the road for 3.5 weeks. And what I tend to do when I'm on the road is I listen to music, podcasts, and I phone people I know. And I seem to know people everywhere. And I started making my phone calls as I was driving out of Lethbridge. And what I was finding was some patterns. There was a sense of pessimism about publishing in this country. Publishers were failing, writers weren't having as many contracts, books weren't selling as much. And while books in general were selling, the sales of Canadian books was plummeting. We were being overwhelmed by the mass of American books. And again, I've got nothing against Dogman or The Hate You Give. Actually, I love The Hate You Give. But they don't represent our culture, or more correctly, our cultures. What we are is a country of different cultures, and I want our Canadian stories to be told. So the idea for I Read Canadian came somewhere on the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border, I think. I contacted 3 organizations very near and dear to my heart in literacy, the Canadian Children's Book Centre with Rose Vespa as the new executive director, the Ontario Library Association with Sheila Patterson and Meredith as the director and the head of the Force of Reading, and Sharon Jennings, who's the Canscape president. And I said, can I take you all out to lunch? And in February, when I got back, I took them all out to lunch. We talked about common things. We talked about things that are known to one group and not the other. And that was the original meeting for I Read Canadian. That's where it started, right there.
Wow. Well, and I understand where that's coming from, but I want to know how you are able to, you collaborate a lot. You collaborate a lot with other Canadian authors. You collaborate a lot with obviously people like CCBC and other organizations, book awards. I mean, that takes a lot of work, I think. And for those people to agree to have lunch with you, I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I know a lot of people. I've been around, I'm, as you can see, old, and I've been around a long time. And I do work collaboratively. I worked with the 7 series with the 6 writers, the Secret series with 6 writers. Nora came over for that because I love working with Nora. But I've collaborated with Deb Ellis for one book, Teresa Toten, my friend Jerome Williams, who's a former Raptor, the collaboration with Kathy, and now I finished a book with my friend Paul Kocha, and I'm working on a book with my buddy Wally Shaw. Wally's a 25-year-old spoken word poet. Wow. And obviously when you think of spoken poets and 25-year-olds, you think of me immediately.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. So I love collaborating with people, and I have relationships with a lot of publishers, a lot of organizations. And I just started making phone calls. Partly it was the phone calls to get the information. Because what I was finding was everyone had a piece of the puzzle, but nobody had all of the puzzle. So independent bookstores didn't know what was going on at Indigo. Indigo didn't know what was going on with wholesalers. Wholesalers didn't connect with faculties of education, who didn't coordinate that much, surprisingly, with library consultants. Publishers didn't talk to teachers. Independents didn't talk to the multinationals. Organizations didn't connect with each other. So I just wanted to get everyone together. So we agreed to have what we call the Literacy Summit. And we brought in publishers, Canadian, Orca from the West Coast, Nimbus from the East Coast, Owl Books. We brought in Penguin Random House and Scholastic. We brought in the independents, as well as Indigo, as well as wholesalers. We got all the organizations, the Writers Union, CanScape, the Canadian School Library Journal, the Ontario Library Association. We brought in teacher librarian consultants, public librarians, publishers, illustrators, writers, and we put us all in one room and figured out what we could do. And we proposed the I Read Canadian, which was taken by everybody. They just thought it was a great idea.
It is a good idea.
It worked out beautifully when you consider that we had no staff and no budget. It was just a bunch of volunteers working in sometimes a haphazard manner. And we ended up with almost 2,000 schools and libraries in the first year. So roughly 1/6 of every setting in the country did that. It's pretty amazing.
Very amazing. That was one of my questions, actually, is like, how many people participated, and you've told us that. How does that make you feel that you sparked that? You got that going?
Sometimes just really tired. What it came down to, just really tired. I think I put about 600 hours in on that. But even the organizations that were involved, when Children's Book Center was involved and the Ontario Library Association, they weren't getting paid to do this. They were donating staff time and extra time and doing above and beyond. That's the thing. Even we had organizations, none of them were getting paid. They were doing it out of the goodness of their heart because we all believe in this. Mm-hmm. We want to see Canadian books because these are our stories. Mm-hmm. We need to tell our stories. I was also quite clear in looking at the multitude of stories and the types of stories. So we did the actual I Read Canadian Day launch, which is available on the Video Biblio channel through Children's Book Center. I invited Ruth Ohi to be there, Melanie Florence, Wally Shaw, who I'm co-writing this book with, Jack Grensky, Sharon Jennings, myself. Who am I missing? Oh, I hate missing people. I think that might be everybody. It was just this amazing event, and it represented the different facets of who we are. We believe in diverse voices in this country, and we believe we have to do our best to bring those people out and let people see. I think we did a good job of doing that.
I think you did a great job of doing that. And that was in year 1. So what do you think we can expect in year 2?
Oh, the pandemic has made everything, what's that old saying, man makes plan and God laughs? We're just trying our best. We would have had our second literacy summit already. We would have talked about new initiatives. We're meeting online. We've already met. It'll be the second Wednesday in February, the third Wednesday, right after the Family Day. So I don't know off the top of my head what day that is. It might be the 15th. It might be the 17th. We're going to try it again. We're going to try and get more people involved, more schools. We'd love to bring daycares into it as well. My phone is just taking over my computer here. Let's see if I can make it go away. Isn't that lovely how that happens? Let's get that off my screen. There we go. We'd like more. We're going to the to Heritage Canada to try and get funding so we can actually have a staff person. And we're going to involve more people. We've involved as founding people along with those original organizations. We brought in an organization from Quebec to try and bring up our participation and make sure we fully represent the Francophone component. We're also having the Canadian School Libraries involved. So those are our 5 founding sort of partners at this point, 5 organizations plus me, I guess. So the 6 partners. And we're doing subcommittees to try and get more people involved. So for example, your wonderful bookstore in Lethbridge, we would love to have them as part of our partnership this coming year. One of the things I would love is on the Saturday before I Read Canadian Day, I would love to have 2 Canadian writers or illustrators in every single bookstore in this country. I'd love those bookstores to promote I Read Canadian Day with displays. I'd love to have a contest where we could award some sort of wonderful prize to the bookstore that has the best displays, as well as the schools and libraries that have the best display. I want to go bigger. I want to go fancier. I want more because I'm really greedy.
Well, I'm glad you're greedy, and I think that you should be as greedy as possible with this cause. And I want to do a little bragging. I shared this with you just over email, but the school that I used to teach at, Dr. Proby, just totally embraced this project. And I didn't have these stats to share with you. I shared a picture, but in a very short period of time, the students at Dr. Proby's school, K to 5, read 1,484 Canadian books over a very short period of time. Like, I would love that to happen in every school across Canada. And then bigger than that, libraries and bookstores, and we'll champion your cause here in Lethbridge and
That's
help
wonderful.
in any way we can.
Well, Lethbridge certainly is a literacy hub for whatever reason. I think it's partly the bookstore, partly the university, partly word on the street. And there's a synthesis that goes on. When you start building something, you build more and more and more. As I said, I wish I could be there. My plan before the pandemic hit, and I had to cancel 134 school presentations and keynotes last spring, was I was going to be out there in Lethbridge and I was going to do a 2 to 3 week tour through Alberta. I had schools lined up and I was ready to go. And instead, I'm sitting here in my fancy looking room. The backdrop is there so you can't see an unmade bed. And I wish I could be out there. The only plus side is I got to wake up in my bed. And once this is through, I'm going out on the lake to paddleboard for a while.
Oh.
So those are the pluses.
Is that where you get some of the inspiration for all these great ideas you come up with?
Well, I think ideas come everywhere. I've been very active. A story I'm working on, I've written 11 pages today. And I've got some things I want to work out. I'll work them out on the lake. There's no question. I also got up at 3 in the morning, actually 3:15, because my characters are having this interesting conversation. And they wouldn't let me go to sleep till I went and made notes. So I made notes about questions I had about them, but also some very distinct chapter ideas, including some lines that went to the chapter I was working on. It's nice when they can write themselves.
It's nice
Sounds
to get
a little
these.
psychotic, though.
I was going to say
my characters were interrupting my sleep.
But what great insight, Eric, that you have given us I mean, you are one of Canada's most prolific writers. And I honestly can't figure out, as I'm sure many people, how you can write so much. Clearly, you're writing in your sleep.
I've been writing in my sleep for the longest time. I do something that I didn't know Ernest Hemingway did, but I never stop writing at the end of a chapter. I always write slightly into the next chapter, even a paragraph or half a page. And then when I go to sleep, that story just starts playing in my head. I do write subconsciously or unconsciously a lot of the time. Some people think it shows in my writing. I hope that's a compliment. I'm not sure sometimes what they mean. You get the problem is that because I write a lot, sometimes people assume I don't write well. I seem to win a whole bunch of awards. So I think I write okay.
Well, I think if you're winning awards, you're writing better than okay.
Yeah, and I'm having fun with it. That's the whole thing. This is supposed to be fun. I'm doing some virtual visits now. I'm going to be reaching out to schools. I've got 12 or 14 lined up. It's not the same. Oh, I love being in schools and meeting teachers and interacting with the kids and drawing the energy out of the room. You know, you draw from them. And it's, I think last year I was on schedule to do close to 550 presentations before the pandemic hit. And that's a pretty constant time for me. I do between 500 and 600 every year for the last forever. The last forever. I love being in schools.
Well,
and I hope my messages are more than just books.
I think they are, and I've been lucky enough to witness a few of those school presentations and presentations at Word on the Street, and your readers love you, and you just keep reinventing stories, and you're so timely. The one you've written most
the
recently,
COVID book.
the COVID book. Yes, that's where I was going.
Yeah, I got at the start of the pandemic, literally hundreds of emails from kids and teachers saying, "So you're writing the pandemic book? It's kind of like your rule of three." And I kept saying, "No, not doing that." But I have answered every email that's been sent to me by every kid for my entire career. So as I was emailing them back, I was thinking, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, a lot of anxiety. And I thought, maybe I can try something. So I contacted my favorite publisher, a Canadian publisher, Orca, and said to the owner, "I've got an idea, but it's got to be out fast." And he said, "How fast?" I said, 40 days. After he stopped choking,
Yeah.
he said, "How would we do this?" The process here, and this is partly with I Read Canadian, it was a collaborative effort, and we worked rather than consecutively, we worked concurrently. So we set up a time when I could meet in a Zoom session with every single person with Orca. And we talked about who would be working on the cover and what would the marketing be and what would chapters be, how would we edit it. And so a lot of processes that go in one, then the next, and the next were going on simultaneously. The cover is being designed before 5 words had been written. And then I had to promise them how fast I could get the book to them. I was doing 14-hour days to produce this book. And at the same time, I had beta readers, because I love beta readers. When I was a teacher, I was always reading to my class. So I had beta readers in British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, Arkansas, and Florida. Teachers, teacher librarians, young people the age of my story. And while I was writing, they were giving me feedback as I was writing. So they'd have 12 chapters, and I'd start asking them for feedback, and then I'd go back and redo things. It was an amazing process. One I probably not going to repeat.
Why do you say that?
14-hour days, nonstop.
No, okay. Fair enough.
And because of the pandemic, we had to do things differently as well with the launch. So I reached out again to friends, people I know. So it was featured on CBC Radio. It was a national news segment for CTV. The Toronto Star did an article about it. Quill Inquirer did an article. It was a featured book on a blog site, one of the best kidlit blog sites. It was featured on 49th Shelf. God, I'm missing so much. We had a podcast with Steve Hurley, wonderful interviewer, Steve Hurley. 4 different organizations promoted it in mail-out blasts, and we did a deal with the Canadian Library Journal where they could have a code and they would get some money sent back to them for every book sold. We had TikToks, for goodness sakes. We had TikToks. We basically did everything imaginable. There was a book trailer. A friend of mine did that. I wrote a teacher's guide. Usually a book trailer takes like 8 weeks to do. Daniel did it in 3 days. Teacher's guides usually take weeks and weeks. I did it in 2 days. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad teacher's guide. I kind of knew the book. Boy, did I know the book. I dreamt that book. I ate that book. My wife knew what level I was working at, where I would get up, she'd make me something to eat, and I'd be walking around the house and onto the backyard eating super spaghetti as I was walking, because it was the only time I wasn't sitting down.
Well, and Eric, I don't know if everyone knows this, but you are a teacher. You're no longer in the classroom, but you taught for many years. And I think that you are still teaching us many things with your books and with your passion for I Read Canada. But you're the perfect person to write a teacher's guide, in my opinion.
I had a lot of fun with it. It's funny, during that time as well, I was finishing up a book with my friend Paul, and I was also I put a book online. Read 35 chapters of a book that isn't published, and put in novel study questions and asked kids to give me feedback. We've had about 85,000 views on that book, and I rewrote the book according to the feedback I got. So I've been relatively busy during this time.
I would say, yeah. One of the things that I have always been so fascinated and impressed with your writing, though, is that you do a ton of research. I've read that you have walked the desert with your son before publishing your book. What was it called? What was the
Just
name
deserts.
of that?
Just deserts. I walked 250K across the Sahara Desert. For Between Heaven and Earth, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my son. For Walking Home, I did over 200 kilometers in Kenya with 4 young Canadians, 4 of my orphans, and 2 special forces policemen with submachine guns. Because sometimes you really want to have a man with a submachine gun with you. We were in some pretty dangerous places, including lion country. With lions, you don't see them until you're dead, basically. The Kenyan saying is, if you see giraffe, think lion. If you see zebra, think lion. You just don't see the lions till it's too late. So we had these guys with submachine guns with us. I love experiential things. And sometimes it's I don't travel the world. With Trapped in Ice, my character was in the freezing Arctic. So I went out into my backyard with a t-shirt and shorts and running shoes in the middle of a blizzard in the winter. I wanted to see what part of my body would freeze off first. I wanted to experience how the snow, it's actually your ears. It's where your mother tells you to wear a hat. I also experienced I was taking notes because I was taking notes and my pen froze up. And I thought, my character's keeping a journal in place closer than this. How do I write? This isn't realistic. So then I figured she'd have to melt her ink supply over a candle. And I did that next to see the way the flame licked around and blackened the glass and how the label started burning off. I love experiential. Sometimes maybe too much.
I want to go to a book that you wrote in 2005 or published in 2005, Run, about Terry Fox. It's Terry Fox's 40th anniversary. And he is a Canadian hero. And that was one of my favorite. Notice I had to change that. It was one of my favorite books of yours for the longest time until a few others came along. But honestly, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because it's so relevant right now, even now after all these years.
Well, I approached the foundation. They'd never let anyone write a book, and I had to convince them. I gave away all the royalties in that book. I would never take money for cancer research. Terry is an amazing hero. I also was involved in creating the National Run Day for the Terry Fox Foundation. Prior to my involvement, they had 4,600 schools. I pitched a national day. We did a pilot one year, and then the next year we came back and had 10,200 schools across the country simultaneously running the Terry Fox Run. And interestingly, for the Reading Summit, I had the head of the Terry Fox Foundation Ontario come in to talk about me presenting crazy ideas. And she ended up by saying, if Eric is suggesting this, you should probably do it because he won't leave you alone till you do it. So just agree to do I Read Canadian.
This is your strategy. I love it.
Well, that's how I got my wife to marry me. I was persistent, just persistent.
Well, and how many years has that been now?
36. It's been lovely during the pandemic. One of the few bright lights is I've spent almost uninterrupted time with my wife for the last 6.5 months. And I just, I've come to realize that first off, she's way too good for me. But second, I really, really appreciate who she is. She's the best person I know back then. She's even a better person now. One of my little changes during this is I learned how to make coffee. I don't drink coffee, but we have this really strange hand grinding, one coffee thing, and I've learned to make coffee. And so every day I start off by making her a coffee and putting on my song for the day. Today, bizarrely, it was a song called Night Rider by Tom Misch. I don't know why Night Rider is a morning song, but it just was in my head, so I played it.
So every day is a different song.
Yeah, a different song, although Shaka Khan has been in there a few times. Kind of a Shaka Khan fan.
We're learning all kinds of neat new things about you in this interview.
Yeah, I also admitted recently I turned off a Raptor game because it was too tense and ended up watching episodes of Grey's Anatomy. God, I never would have thought I'd admit that to anyone.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, interesting show. Although I have to be quiet because there's one episode I told my wife 9 distinct changes and things that were going to happen in the plot, right down to the lines that we're going to introduce them. And so I can be a terrible person to watch with because I can predict a lot of what's going to happen. Unless it's a show like Dexter. Dexter always confused me and didn't see it coming sometimes.
And do you try to pull that into your books too, where it's unpredictable, didn't see it coming?
You've got to provide enough foreshadowing that kids can see it, and it depends on the age you're writing for. So if you're writing for 9-year-olds, your foreshadowing has to be sufficient for them. As I move to older YA, the foreshadowing has to be more subtle. It's like a magic trick. You want them to have some clues, but you don't want them to see it coming, or it's like a train coming down the tracks at you. So I look at the foreshadowing in terms of who I expect to read the book. And nothing against Grey's Anatomy. I love the show. It's just its plotting is really just so obvious.
Yeah. Eric, you've written for almost all ages now.
Yeah, board books up to YA. No adult.
No adult, but you've gotten recently into picture books and board books. Yeah. And so is that sort of one of the first things you think about when you get an idea, is what age group is this going to work with? Definitely.
I wrote shouted about the Rwanda genocide. I didn't see that as a picture book. I saw that definitely as YA. So I'm always trying to figure out what subject and what area I should aim that for.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think you could probably write a great picture book on COVID now. Our younger students need that too. But
there are dozens of them out there right now. I was shocked with how many people have written a COVID book. What we wanted to do in our book was not just write a book, but write a good book. And I wanted kids to know about some terms. I wanted them to know about flattening the curve and exponential growth. And I wanted to give them a sense of hope. And the feedback from that book has been phenomenal. It's being read as a first book in classes across North America right now. And then a lot of them have asked me to do virtual visits based on that. So I'm doing a bunch of virtual visits. Not as good as being there in Lethbridge, but you do what you can, right?
That's right. I'm really grateful for these virtual visits. And I think that COVID has given us an opportunity to connect in different ways. And I think that Canadian books are more important than they've ever been because of COVID.
I think so. Now I'm wondering, should we go to a few questions as our time is starting to wind down?
Yep, perfect timing.
Now I'm looking there. There's a question from, it says Alicia Smith, but it's actually Marcus. Marcus, have you stolen your mother's computer? That's all I can think of. Give it back after this, okay? So it says, hi, my name is Marcus. I'm 11 years old. I'm reading The Rule of Three and love it. My question is, part of it makes me think it is set in Mississauga, but other parts make me think it is set in the US. Which is right? The answer is both, Marcus. I wrote this in Mississauga. My US publisher said, can you make it more American? And I said, I guess I can, but I left all the street names, everything is Canadian. The street where the young character lives is my street where I lived for 20 years and raised my kids. It's very Canadian, and the fourth book in the series, because every trilogy needs a fourth, is called Fourth Dimension, and that's set on Toronto Island. So that was very observant of you, Marcus. If you go on Google Maps and look at 4082 Powderhorn Crescent, that's where I used to live. And there's me and one of my dogs walking on Google Maps to this day. So you'll see us there. I'm the one that isn't little and little white on the leash. That's my my old dog, Winnie the Poodle.
Oh, so great Laura, name.
So, well, our last dog was called Beyonce. We didn't name her. She was a rescue dog. It's a great name to have. People know you if you have a dog named Beyonce.
Winnie the Poodle too, though.
Yeah, but if you're in the park and yelling Beyonce, put down the dead squirrel, it really sounds awful. Like you're afraid Jay-Z is going to come someday and punch you in the face or something. Now let's see. We got a question from Laura. How do you carve out time to write when you do so many things? I am hyperactive. I need to work continually, but even during the pandemic, I've made a point of starting every day with a list I made the night before of what I'm supposed to do. I get up, I make my wife coffee while playing my song of the day, and then I get to work. You can't waste time. And waste of time is video games, social media. God, when you're writing, when you're doing things, turn off your email, turn off your Twitter, turn off everything and just focus on the story. I'm having a polite conversation with my characters, sometimes an impolite conversation, but they're my focus. I would no more interrupt my story writing to go on social media than I would interrupt this to say, Michelle, I've got a phone call. I'll get back to you later. It's just wrong. So I focus on what I'm doing. Okay, next question from an anonymous attendee. I never trust those anonymous people. Possibly wanted by the police is my guess. I grew up reading your books, and my favorite ones were the historical fiction ones, Elixir, Run Camp X. Are there any Canadian historic moments you never got to, but would love to write one day? I love Tommy Douglas. I don't know how to make him into a story. It's funny, when there was the Greatest Canadian Contest, I had this discussion with the Foxes, and obviously Terry was one of the greatest Canadians. He remains, but I told them that Tommy Douglas was my selection. Wow. The things that we are as Canadians started in Saskatchewan. Universal public health, medical treatment for everybody. The first declaration of human rights was in Saskatchewan. We predate the UN. This came from Tommy Douglas. I keep telling people when I'm in Saskatchewan, you may be a little province, but you're a mighty province. And I don't consider you central Canada. I consider you the heart of Canada. Whenever I say that, people from Manitoba and Alberta get mad at me. I don't know. It's not a competition. I love you all, but Saskatchewan is pretty near and dear to my heart. Many fine writers, including the wonderful and lovely Arthur Slade. He's not that lovely, but he is wonderful. Let's see, what else have we got? When writing, do you use an electric program or paper and pencil? I write almost exclusively with my computer unless I can't. So I have, when I was climbing Kilimanjaro, I can't bring a computer up. There's nowhere to charge it. It's wet. It weighs 7 pounds, which at the top of the mountain feels like 30 pounds. When I'm crossing deserts, I can't do that. So I tend to write with paper and pen in there. I have this. This is my writing book. This one's called The Right Stuff with Eric Walter. But I have a writing book like this for everything. And I have that with me wherever I go continually. So I'll write when I have a few minutes. I just write. It's work, but it's a joy. Okay, so Marcus is excited. You know there was a fourth book. It's called The Fourth Dimension. And a character in that book, her name is Chris. She's a woman in her 80s who lives on Toronto Island. Chris is actually my grade 5 teacher. She's now 94. She lives on Toronto Island. The book is dedicated to her. She is also the woman in grade 5 who said, Ricky, I used to be called Ricky. Ricky, you could be a writer when you grow up, which I thought was incredibly stupid since I was going to be in the NBA. That hasn't happened as yet. But if the Raptors had me on their team, it would be us playing Miami right now, not Boston. Just saying, okay? Do I have a favorite book that you've written? My favorite book is the book I'm writing right now. It's called Voice. I'm co-writing with my good friend, Wally Shaw. Wally, I've known for about 5 or 6 years. He was the emerging artist of the year in Mississauga when I was the established artist of the year in Mississauga. He's a spoken word poet, and we are writing a story about a Pakistani boy growing up in Mississauga, experiencing self-doubts as well as prejudice, and him finding his own voice through his poetry that becomes spoken word poems. And we're using Wally's actual poems and new stuff that he's writing, and we're embedding it into the story. And I'm working with Wally because he's an emerging talent who will be so well known in the next few years. It's been a real good process. And part of the promotion is we're actually going to have him record all of the spoken word poems in the book, and they'll be an adjunct to the book itself. So that's what I'm working on. That's my favorite because I'm working on it. 11 pages today. And I don't know if we have any more questions. Let me go down. How do you come up with the names for your characters? Now, Peggy actually listed herself. So I believe Peggy is not wanted by the Emily's. I could be wrong, but she has put her name right up there. So good for me. These characters in this book, we did some talking. When you're co-writing with somebody, we talked about the characters, and we wanted to have names that would be Pakistani names, but also have a Canadian version you could use if you were trying to run from your past. So the main character's name is Ali. He likes to go by Al. Osama is his older brother. He goes by Sam because when he goes by Osama, people make fun of him and call him a terrorist. And there's some pretty bad things out there when people act like that. And his younger brother is Danish. These are all very Pakistani names. Danish, of course. Well, Michelle, what do you think Danish goes by?
Danny.
Yeah, Danny. Yeah, exactly. So the names have significance. Sometimes in Rule of Three, I called my character Adam because he lived in Eden Mills and was starting a new life. In Stand Your Ground, I called him Jonathan Moore because he needed more. In other cases, characters are named after my children or their friends. In Don't Stand So Close to Me, Quinn, Reese, and Isaac, they're my grandchildren. I put their names in this book. Other times I've had up to 13 kids in my class as named characters in the book. And again, I was asking their permission. I would never go to one of my students and say, I'm writing this character. He's an awful person and he smells bad. Could I name him after you? I don't do that. But I love to put the names of people that are important to me in those books.
They would love it too.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My kids also used to joke to their friends when they were around the house. They'd say, whatever you do, be careful what you say around my father. It might end up in a book.
Yes, good point.
I'm that guy in the coffee shop who's writing, but also kind of tilting his head to the side and listening into conversations.
Ideas for stories.
Exactly.
Eric, Jenny's given us the 2-minute mark, but I want to correct a small little error I made. I referred to your book, Broken Strings, but it is written, co-written with Kathy Kaser.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't say that when I referred to it before, but a great place to end because this book has been nominated for the TD and because I personally think it is an incredible story. Can you give us just a quick little blurb about this?
This book started with me driving in my car, which many things seem to start. I was driving up Airport Road, this hilly road in Toronto, in Caledon, and I had this idea and called Kathy. And it's about a girl who's, it has a Holocaust theme to it. It's set in 2002. It has a musical theater component. And I called Kathy because Kathy is the primary Holocaust writer in the world for young people. And what people don't know is her son was the premier male actor in the Carole King story on Broadway. Starred as Spider-Man on Broadway, and her daughter was just a lead actress in a Stratford production of Little Shop of Horrors. Who better to write this with? And the collaboration is so interesting. We're talking about the play, and I told Kathy, well, when the tryouts for the play happen, and at intermission, at halftime, and she said, no, it's auditions and intermission. I said, okay, I don't get that stuff. But then I was a line where my character says, man, being in a play is harder than being submarined by a blitzing linebacker. And she looked at me and said, what? So we combined. This is a story about a grandfather in his past and how music can be both something that opens up old wounds, but something that can heal. It's a wonderful book. Working with Kathy was a delight.
Well, speaking of delight, this has been delightful. We're so grateful. It has been fun. It's been interesting. We learned more new things about you, and you've ignited that passion for reading. I want to go and read some of the books that you talked about that I haven't. I'm sure you've done that for others. And keep promoting Canadian literature, authors, illustrators, publishers, booksellers. We need them. We need them more than ever, and we need to help our Canadians. We need Canada. I think you said that. We need more Canada.
The world needs more Canada. I would love if people from the Lethbridge Word on the Street or the bookstore there would give me a call, email me, and let's see how we can get you involved in this, because we want to make this a larger partnership to make it a larger success, and we need everyone to be part of that. Thank you very much, Michelle. And thank you, tech people. And I didn't do anything foolish today.
Thanks, Eric. Nice to meet you, and thanks for it. It was great to have you here. And
Thank you
thank you,
very much.
Michelle. You're a great interviewer.
Oh, thank you. I was
Bye.
inspired.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye now.